welcome back. It's the end of October, early November 2025, and we now have the annual upgrades for Adobe Lightroom and Photoshop. And in this video, we're going to take a look at what's new in Adobe Lightroom Classic version 15, which is the 2026 version. So let's jump in and take a look at what's new. So Lightroom Classic version 15. And the first thing you'll notice is that when you open it, you get a new splash screen, which is a change from the old one. But of course, one thing that will happen is that when you try and update from the old version, you're going to need to update your catalog, and that will take a few minutes. And the second thing that is likely to happen is that you'll get this notification on your screen here that says we can't verify your subscription. I've checked this, and of course I can log onto the internet and I can check my subscription is valid, but for some reason it's coming up with an error message, and if I go and look at the options, it doesn't even identify the error. So let's just try again, and it'll say no, continue. I think you should just ignore that. It will get sorted out in due course. So an update to the catalog will take a few minutes to run, but let's have a look at the new tools. And there are a few important new tools, and the first ones are in the library module. And the first thing we have here is we have a thing called assisted culling. Now, this may or may not be of great assistance to you, but if you have a lot of photographs of similar topics or similar subjects, and I've just grouped together a number here that are from a recent photo shoot, but you can go in here into this new panel called assisted culling. This is an early access part of the system, which means that it's not yet fully up to speed, but it seems to work in a general way. And so you can look at things like, well, I want to select based on whether the image or what the content of the image is focused. And you can see here that when I do this, and I've just got a default here of the midway between soft and sharp, and it gives most of these a tick, so that's fine. That's all very good. I think most of them are in focus. But if I was to move this slider and say, well, I only really want to pick the absolute sharpest images, you'll see now that I'm getting some error messages. Well, not error messages, but it's indicating that this photo, for instance, is not necessarily sharp, and well, there are probably some parts of the image that are sharply focused, but depending on how you adjust this slider, you will see that these will come back into focus. So that may or may not be of a great deal of use to you. And then you have the option here of, particularly if you're photographing people or groups of people, whether the eye's in focus, whether the eyes are open or not. You can reject documents and reports. You can reject misfires. Well, misfires, that's a little bit of a loose topic. Or you could select, say, exposure issues. Now, I don't have any in this particular group that have exposure issues, but if I was to go back to one of my other sections in the catalogue, there are certainly ones that came up as indicating there was a problem with the exposure. So this is of some merit and of some use depending on whether you're trying to just cull out of a big photo shoot, and you have some controls on here, so that's all fine. Then amongst this assisted culling, we have a thing called auto stacking, and what it can do is can stack together images that were taken at the same or more or less the same time, or you can stack by visual similarity. And you'll see here that I've actually got several versions of the same image where I've done different things to them. So let's just say let's stack by visual similarity, and again we have a slider that indicates more or less similarity. So let's just move this down, and let's say let's stack those, and it's done a fairly good job of identifying images that were similar. So we've got a little symbol here that says there are 3 photographs in this stack. If I click on that number 3, it'll show me the ones that were in that stack, and in this one there were 2 versions that were similar. So this may be of use if you're trying to just eliminate things that are all taken at the same time. You can just stack them together, and these are probably worthwhile enhancements that can be used with discretion when you're trying to sort images through your catalogue. And just while we're looking at this assisted culling option, in another group of photographs I've got some more photos that have variances in exposure and focusing. So let's just try the same filtering on that one. Let's just say, yeah, let's have a look at filter out the ones that are in focus, and let's say we really only want the sharp ones. There are no eyes in this photograph, but let's have a look at any what they consider misfires, or more importantly, exposure issues, because there were some really difficult exposure situations here, and it's flagged out some here that this one, and if I click on or hover on the little X symbol, it'll tell me here, it says it's out of focus, and this one says, well, the focus is okay, but the exposure is wrong or underexposed, which is probably correct. And so again, you've got options here. I was trying a number of different settings here, and you can see here, focus is okay, exposures no good, and so forth. So it is a way to select out of a whole group of photographs whether or not they're suitable or not. This one says it's out of focus. It probably was out of focus. So it's a useful tool. But then when we come to looking at the results, we can have a look at how we can handle the results by just looking here, organizing results. So we've got 77 photos selected. Do we want to apply a flag or a rating to them, color label, or even put them in a collection? And then what about the rejects? There are 6 photos. These are the underexposed or out of focus ones. Do we want to put a flag on them, a rating, color label, or so forth? So you've got really good options of how to sort these ones that are either out of focus or poor exposures or misfires or whatever. So it can be quite useful in an extensive photo shoot where you've got lots of photos to try and sort through. So let's now move on to the new tools in the Develop module. And the first one we're going to look at is a tool that's called the Variance tool that comes under part of the Color Mixer in the Develop module. So let's just open up the Color Mixer, and just to remind people, you've got the 2 options here. You have the individual sliders that can control hue, saturation, and luminance individually, or you can use the point color option where you can use the eyedropper to select an area and then apply an adjustment to particular colors. So I've actually worked on a variant of this image, and let's just have a look. This is how I processed it from the original, and then what I did was I selected out the colors in here in the background, which were a bit dull. This was taken in early spring, and so the foliage hadn't really greened up. It was still fairly brown. So what I did was I looked at the particular color here, and I shifted the hue away from this browny color more into a greeny color, and then we have this variance slider, and if I just reset that, what we're going to try and do is I've moved all of those browny colors into more of a green, but it looks now a little bit overall green. And what I'm going to do now is use the variance slider to try and separate the colors away from each other so that there's a little bit more of a color separation. And you can quite clearly see here, if I take this back to 0, double click on the slider and it takes it back to 0, and if I take it all the way to the negative side, you'll see that the whole of the image is now taken on this greeny cast, which is really not what I want. So let's just reset that to 0 and take it over to the right hand side. Gives you a little bit more color separation. And if I turn this eye off initially, you can see that the overall image was quite brown and dull, and we've moved that up by enhancing changing the hue of those particular colors and then adjusting the variance. And of course you could still come back to the color mixer and make individual adjustments. Let's just say for the yellows we can lighten or darken those individually, and the greens, and still use those options. But that's the variance slider, which is now in the color mixer section and under the point color, where you can optionally adjust the variance between the hues of the different colors. And another example of how we can use that variance slider, this time another image that's also a little bit dull, taken on a very overcast and rainy day in Scotland. And you can see it's a little bit flat, Here's a version that I've modified using a variation of selections of the sky and so forth. And you can see here that I need to update the AI masking because I've fiddled around with the image after I did the masking. That's just updated itself. And what I've done here is I've sampled the sky, and I took the example of the blue. If I turn that off, you'll see that after the processing the sky got quite excessively blue, so I've used the color probe to sample the blue, and I've just taken the saturation down. You can see it was way over the top. I've just taken that down quite a bit. And I don't really need to do much in the way of variance there because it just adds more contrast to the sky, so we'll leave that at 0. But what we can do is have a look at the foliage, and you can see here that I've sampled the orangey yellow parts here, and I can change the hue of those colors if I want, which goes from really quite orangey back through yellow. I don't really want to do that, but let's just look at the variance, how we can change the variance. It's not so much obvious there, but if I go to the example of the greeny browns in that, let's just sample the greeny parts of the image. Now if I shift the variance, you can see now how that dramatically changes how those colors are represented. So the variance tool can be quite useful in fine-tuning those color differences between similar colors. Now the next new tool in Lightroom Classic is the dust removal tool. Now I looked at this in an earlier version some months ago, and it was okay but not perfect, but it's now become part of the suite of tools within Lightroom. And I've picked a really bad image here, which was a terrible image where I tried to clean the center and made a complete hash of it and made it much worse. And you can see here in this photograph that the sky is full of ugly spots on the center, and if this was to be removed manually dot by dot, I probably wouldn't even bother trying. But what we can do is we can go into the remove tool, and we can look now down at the options here, and we have the distraction removal options now available, and of course we have dust removal. So if I just tick on apply, it's going to have a look at finding all of the dust spots, and it's going to attempt to remove them. And let's see what sort of a job it does, because this one is a particularly bad example, and let's just see if it can really identify all of those spots. And I'm just talking while this takes a little bit of time to process, and now we can see the results. Bingo. Well, let's just turn that off and on, or if we hover over here we can see where all the dust spots have been removed, and that's pretty horrendous. Let's just turn that off and on. No, sorry, I need to just go back here, and here's my before, here's my after. Now I'm going to say that it's pretty good, but it's not perfect. You'll see here that if I zoom in here, whoops, we were zoomed in. Let's just have a look. There are a couple of tiny spots that have been missed, but overall, when you look at the size of this image and all of the spots that it's identified, I think it's done a pretty reasonable job. But again, it's not 100% perfect, and you may still need to then go in and manually take a few of those out. But overall, this is a big improvement, and as I said, an image like this one that had such a terrible mess in the sky, I probably wouldn't even attempt to use it. So that's a worthwhile addition. Now the last set of updates that we're going to take a quick look at comes under the presets in Lightroom. And of course we have user presets where you can make your own presets, but they have introduced over the last couple of versions these adaptive presets. And of course we have things like landscape, subject, sky and portrait. If I just look at some of these adaptive landscapes and I just hover on it, you can see that in some instances it does a really good job of providing you an improved starting off point for your processing, and in other cases probably not so much. Now when you click on any of these presets. They can sometimes take a little while to process, but as you can see as I scroll through these, they're not looking too bad. Some of them are a little bit better than others. That gives you a little bit more of an autumn feel. And if we go back to the spring, yeah, look, it's good. It's not perfect, but again, what it's going to do is it's going to give you a better starting off point. And if we go back to our basic panel, we can then make adjustments from there on. But by all means, give these a try, and some of them are going to work for you. But again, it's not the end of the processing steps. It's just another beginning point. So that's the adaptive presets, and you can have a look at all of those and give them a try. And one last improvement that's made its way into Lightroom is a way to more accurately carry out cropping of your images. Now, previously, when you wanted to use the cropping tool, you would just go to the cropping tool and you're looking at the full image to make the adjustments. But if you happen to then go into, say, zoom into 50%, press the space bar to get the hand tool. Let's say we wanted to accurately crop in just one part of it. We can crop in while zoomed, and that can be a bit of a benefit for you, and we can just go back to fit, and that might be of assistance when you have some fairly critical cropping to do. So that's the last of the major updates with Lightroom 2026 or version 15. They also claim to have made some performance improvements, which, again, depending on your machine and processing, it may or may not make much of a difference. But of course, you need to just remember that when you do make this update, it's going to need to make a new version of your catalogue for you, or update the catalogue. So I hope that's all been useful. We'll look at the updates in Photoshop in a video in the coming weeks. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you again soon.